So, Nerima, I was asking you over the break what hurdles people can face when they're trying to get into in vitro fertilization. Just tell us about that before we get to the doctor to tell us what to expect for this as a treatment option, because we had Ms. Nyambura earlier on telling us that this was a hope and, of course, a solution that she had no idea about. So, Nerima, over to you.
Thank you again. So I think the possible biggest hurdle one can face when it comes to in vitro fertilization and the law is the issue around the framing in our constitution that life begins at conception.
Yes.
Which would then occur as soon as a gamete fertilizes an egg, which then becomes an embryo. Mm-hmm. That can later be stored or implanted. It's not necessary that each of them is implanted in a woman, but then the time of conception needs to be defined as whether or not it's at the point that it's implanted in a woman or when it actually takes place when the gamete fertilizes the egg. So those are some of the legal questions that would need to be answered by legislation, and that can give clear guidance. This is quite important because if it is the latter time, which is when it's fertilized, it might then mean the decision to not proceed with implantation might have a legal consequence to it.
Okay. Very interesting. And now we've heard the experience of Ms. Nyambura, Esther Nyambura, who's coming to us via phone link. When you hear that story, Dr. Kandwala, what comes to your mind? And of course, that paints a picture of in vitro fertilization being such a God-sent procedure for people who are suffering. Tell us about the good that can be brought about by people such as Nyambura when they get to afford this sort of treatment.
Yeah, actually, I could not hear the audio by Esther because, it was a little distorted on my laptop. However,
for your sake and for the people who are at home who also could not hear her, she said she got infections when she was younger, and this resulted in blocked tubes. She had no information about how to treat some infections, so she just powered through them when she was a child. So by the time she was an adult, she had infertility and struggled with it for 13 years. And at the end of it all, by the time she was getting to IVF, she had never heard of such a thing. So it was a godsend. It was a very good thing for her, and had to go through that process. And of course, we shall get the end of that story as we go along with the show. But when you hear this sort of story, is it typical, and why is this such a good thing for people who are facing infertility?
Yeah, as I was earlier saying, there are so many factors for infertility, and the degree of factors also vary. So you have the woman, the man, both and unexplained, and then you have the degrees of infertility. As in her case, she had blocked tubes because of prior infection early on in life.
Yes.
And therefore sometimes when the tubes get blocked, they can be unblocked by doing a tuboplasty or a surgery. But sometimes the tubes are so badly damaged. The fallopian tube is just not a lead pipe, which just transmits water. It has to transmit the gametes, so it has to have functional capacity inside itself. So when the infection internally destroys the tube or blocks it, then it is incapable of doing that. The fertilization, as you know, naturally occurs in the fallopian tube.
Yes.
The sperms and the eggs meet in the fallopian tube, and then the embryo over the fertilized egg over the next 5 days travels at 6.5 or 7 centimeters from the lateral part of the fallopian tube into the womb or the uterus, and then implants as a blastocyst. And that is what we do artificially in the lab. The same natural conception that takes place, that is the egg and the sperm being fertilized, we do it by the process of ICSI or intracytoplasmic sperm injection in the IVF lab. So we retrieve the eggs of the woman. We do not allow her to ovulate spontaneously. We give her injections for a period of 10 days from the 2nd or 3rd day of her menstrual cycle. And then her eggs grow to maturity. Then by a ultrasound-guided retrieval procedure, we remove those eggs. Of course, in IVF, we do not just want one egg, which happens in a natural conception or a spontaneous cycle, but we want many. So we would want somewhere between 10 and 15 eggs to be retrieved. Of course, some women have, it depends upon the capacity of the woman or the the ovarian reserve, some women can give 10 eggs, some women 15, some even 5, and some even 25 to 30. So then these eggs are fertilized by the sperm with ICSI in our IVF lab. And these eggs are then, they form embryos after 3 days in the incubator. The incubator in our lab acts as the fallopian tube in the natural conception.
Yes.
So the incubator provides all the nutrients and everything and the gases in order to fertilize the egg. The embryos form on the 3rd day, and we transfer them on the 3rd day of the fertilization, or we wait for the 5th day, which is now becoming more common in our lab. That is a blastocyst transfer, where we have fertilization rates and implantation rates as high as 70 to 80% now. You know, IVF has really come a long way. We just celebrated World IVF Day last month in July, way back in 78, when Louise Brown was born in UK by the first, who was the first IVF baby. She's now, 78, so she's 40 plus now. She herself has a child. So since then, IVF has changed a lot. So many new technologies, so many new techniques, so many new equipments have come, and therefore we have been going on updating ourselves. We have to go and update ourselves, every year almost, and to bring new techniques and new equipments to Kenya, so that we can give the best pregnancy rates to our clients.
Okay, and when we talk about that, basically what you have described is IVF is basically an imitation of the natural process, because the woman's body might not be able to go through that process for one reason or the other. So then would you say that the stigma that surrounds this IVF process, particularly in African society and in the developing world, where kids sometimes might be called test tube babies, is not justified?
Yeah, I would say that, because, before I go into that, IVF stands for in vitro fertilization.
Yes.
In vitro means outside the body.
Yes.
In vivo is inside the body, in vitro is outside. So in vitro fertilization. And I think the stigma is going down a lot now, when more and more people are realizing and getting the knowledge about IVF. Earlier there used to be a taboo or a stigma saying that, this IVF, this woman has got pregnant through IVF. I don't know whose sperms she may have got, whether she got a husband's sperm or somebody else's sperms, So there were so many things going around that time.
Yeah.
But now, when more and more knowledge, when more and more this material is available on the net, and people are reading, and therefore realizing that IVF is not such a bad thing,
Yes.
I mean, it's a very good thing. For some couples, it's as in case of Esther Boyashi, it's a real gift from God.
Now, yes.
So also my patients, when they conceive, they are so delighted, and they are so full of blessings. So I think it's a big step ahead for our human race, and I believe that IVF will become more and more common. As you can see, that there is a mushrooming of clinics all over the world, including in Kenya. In Kenya, since the last 6 years that I have been here.
Actually,
even more
that's
than
where
that.
I was
the
going.
Last 6 years as a director, I have seen that the number of clinics in Nairobi itself has doubled.
I was actually going to ask you about the availability of this treatment for the common mwananchi in Kenya, because it might be viewed as something that is a preserve of the rich or those who are really moneyed. So when you talk about the affordability of IVF and availability in this country, what is the broader picture? What is the situation on the ground?
First of all, let me start by saying that 20% of the couples who are in the, birth age or the family growing age would be infertile. So 1 in 5 couples would be infertile. Among them, everybody does not need IVF.
Okay.
Because it depends upon the factor of infertility. Now, there are so many infertility cases which can be treated by plain medication, or just by doing a laparoscopy or a hysteroscopy to see what are things inside, or even an HSG, the hysterosalpingography, and the semen analysis. Once you do all this diagnosis, you can treat them by medical or or at the most by intrauterine or artificial insemination.
Yes.
So 60 to 70% of these ladies or the couples would get a child with that those techniques. 30% of these couples would require to go for in vitro fertilization.
Yes.
Of course, because it's 1 in 5 couple, so even 30% is quite a large number. You see, so 30 to 40% becomes a very large chunk of couples requiring in vitro fertilization.
Indeed.
Now, as far as the cost factor is concerned, you could be, down by $500,000 for just one cycle.
Okay.
And
what are the
that,
percentages
it's
and the
not a
chances?
guaranteed success rate.
What would the chances be?
Sorry?
What would the chances of success be given one cycle?
So as I was telling you earlier, the female age factor is very important. So the woman's age would determine ultimately how the success rate would be, because the woman's age would determine how her egg will behave and how her uterus will behave. And therefore, we have very high chance of pregnancy, that is almost 70 to 80% IVF success rate in women who are between 25 and 35.
All right.
But as she goes about 35 to 40, it becomes something like 50 to 60%. And even over 40, then it really declines and becomes 25 to 30%. So it's better that it's caught earlier. It's better that the couple comes earlier to us so that we can treat them more optimally and give them better success rates.
Okay. Now, let's get Nyambura's sentiments. She did tell us that she struggled for 13 years to get with infertility. Once this was a treatment option, she felt like this was something good for her. So your experience once you got the right medical attention, tell us what IVF did for you. What was it like? What was the treatment? How did it affect your body? And how was it to the point that you got yourself pregnant?
Bank.
Yes.
600,000. I went to the hospital.
That was the amount you had to have?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I paid cash. I took a loan because I didn't have another source of income. And then I started using me because of my hormones and all that, because I was like 6 years.
Yes.
So I even needed to be checked properly, and the scans being done, and the process was successful.
Okay, go on.
I got twins, a boy and a girl.
You got twins?
Yes, I have a boy and a girl who are 7 years. And then I also got some side effects.
What were the side effects?
Blood pressure, very high blood pressure. Even when I was pregnant, for 3 months together. Because of my age also, and also I developed abnormal weight gain.
Abnormal?
Weight gain.
Oh, weight gain, yes.
Because I was 103 kg from 69 kg.
Wow, interesting. So you are putting forth some of the very typical concerns that come out of IVF and the treatment. So I'd like to throw this one over to Mr. Kandwana. She's talking about some of the typical issues that come with pregnancy. Pressure, gestational pressure sometimes is a concern, and then you're having multiples, which is another thing that people talk about. And at the same time, she is talking about weight gain, abnormal weight gain, which I assume is due to the hormonal treatments that come with IVF. Could you address those?
Yeah, so, as I was telling you, when we do, I really don't know what is the exact process she underwent.
Yeah.
But as far as a typical IVF treatment would concern, the woman would undergo injections to grow her eggs for a period of 10 to 12 days.
Yeah.
And those injections can cause, but now, the newer injections are much better. They cause very less side effects. They just cause a little bloating. They just cause a little discomfort because the ovaries grow in size. The ovaries used to just growing one follicle, but when you do IVF, the ovaries are used to, they get 10, 12, 15 follicles growing in each ovary. So you will have discomfort when you have such a load in your lower abdomen, So that that discomfort is there, but once you do the egg retrieval, all that discomfort and all the side effects that she's talking about would go away. That is bloating, gaining weight, fluid collection in the body, all that would go away as soon as the egg retrieval is done.
Okay.
And then now we have so many techniques, there are so many variations and so many things that we can play around with in order to really cause very less side effects.
Yes.
And one of the side effects that does happen in some women who have a high ovarian reserve with a lot of follicles is what is called as ovarian hyperstimulation, which is the worst among them all. You know, in an ovarian hyperstimulation, if it is not controlled well and it goes to a very bad degree, it can lead to even an admission in an ICU. You know, and you know, in these times when we're in a pandemic, nobody wants to have such a complication.
For sure, yeah.
So our MediHeal, we have ensured that all our IVF centers are OHS free. That means free of ovarian hyperstimulation. How we do that? Because we monitor the patient very well, who's, we know which women are prone to go for OHS or ovarian hyperstimulation. We monitor them well, we treat them in time, so that, and we prevent this from happening by using various types of medications, oral, intravenous, etc.
Okay.
And even if into ovarian hyperstimulation, we can actually treat it at the early period so that it doesn't go into more complications. And one of the treatment to do is to freeze the embryos. We have a very good freezing technique in our labs, and we have a very good freezing success rates. And we freeze the embryos. We do not transfer the embryos so that woman does not have a problem in the pregnancy.
Okay.
And when the ovaries are good enough, they are normal, then we transfer the embryos after thawing the frozen embryos. So freezing is very important, you know. It's part and parcel of IVF, and it's going to become more and more a part of it.
Okay. Now, well, that is, and you've addressed those concerns. What about the concern about having multiples? She said she got twins. Some people say they get 4, 6 children out after treatment. Is this something that people should be concerned about, and can it be controlled? Yeah,
you know, this is a double-edged sword. What happens is that in the Western countries, they have a thing called single embryo transfer. Because, you know, there it is, the pregnancies and everything are insurance based. So the insurance companies do not want to spend more money in a pregnancy which has got a multiple, because there's a high chance of prematurity, admission in intensive premature care units and NICUs, you know. So they don't want to spend the money, so they insist for IVF, you know, there are regulations we don't have any regulations, but there are regulations that you do a single embryo transfer. So when you do a single embryo transfer, you get only a singleton pregnancy, isn't it? Unless the embryo splits into 2 and you get a monochorionic twin. But otherwise, here there are no regulations. However, if you do a single embryo transfer, the other part of it is that you might not get a good success rate. Because if that particular embryo happens to be abnormal, and every woman produces an abnormal embryo. So you see, if that happens to be an abnormal embryo, then you are you don't get the conception at all, and your conception rates can go down to 25 to 30%. So in order to ensure a good pregnancy rate or to ensure conception, we have to transfer 3 or 4 day 3 embryos, sometimes 3, sometimes 2 even. Otherwise, on day 5, we can transfer at least 2 blastocysts. So this would naturally mean that if both implant, we can have, there is a high chance of multiple pregnancy or twins, you know. But of course, as you were saying, 6 or 7, that is very rare. High order multiples are very rare. But we've had, in our lab, we have had an experience of having twins, of course, but even sometimes triplets. And very, very rarely, once in a year, I get a quadruplet. That is.
Now, I'd like to bring in Ms. Were to give us her opinion in terms of policies, insurance companies, and as far as IVF is concerned, what would be the ideal scenario, and what is it right now for patients, or rather people going through this sort of treatment?
Okay. Well, I think I can start with what Dr. Shandawala has touched on with the multiple pregnancies or with the twins, triplets, quadruplets that could happen. That is quite likely to happen. The largest issue that would then come is if that was not what you were prepared to do. Termination of pregnancy is not very clear in this country. So that you might want to, and we've had similar cases in Latin America where they have restrictive laws on termination of pregnancies and abortions, and you might want to terminate some of those pregnancies, like terminate some of the embryos, not all, but that's not a very clear issue within our country, so that might become problematic, and you might be forced to carry all 4 to term or 3 to term, which does have risks involved with having those in place. Another thing that would come up with insurance, and this has also been mentioned by Dr. Shandawala, is the more embryos you have, the higher likely you are to have them preterm.
Yes.
Because they don't necessarily develop fully for the 9 months in multiple numbers. And a lot of the time, insurance companies are quite reluctant to cover pregnancy and birth under a certain term limit. So for many, it's 37 weeks, it could be 36 weeks, but if we have it preterm in a case whereby it's below the threshold, you might then suffer the cost of that pregnancy in its entirety, despite being covered by insurance. Having IVF covered is also an unlikely thing to happen. It's possible for you to be able to negotiate it, but it's an unlikely thing to happen. This is something that will be covered by contract and not necessarily by robust insurance packages. For the most part, most of our insurance packages preclude pre-existing conditions, and that includes any condition that is found within 6 months of your insurance cover. And most insurance covers run for a 1-year period. So that can be almost any condition you already have or that you discover at the time that you already have insurance. And infertility is likely to be, or most chances will be a pre-existing condition, so you are unlikely to have it covered. IVF treatment being covered by insurance, very unlikely. So you do have continuous conversations with the Insurance Regulatory Board around the insurance packages that are made available and their affordability. But however, most of insurance works around economies of scale, and for the most part, many Kenyans are not insured and rely on NHIF, National Health Insurance Fund, or just rely on going to public health facilities and hoping that they can access services. So the small pool of Kenyans that is actually insured by private insurers is not high enough for high enough economies of scale to justify a robust insurance package.
For IVF.
And even when that does happen, it's not that the fee is low enough that we can include more and more Kenyans into such package. And that does go to consumer protection and what the government needs to do in terms of ensuring that you're expanding things like universal health coverage and you're having conversations around reproductive health in priority setting discussions. So we already have universal health coverage in 4 counties in this country, but you don't necessarily have robust conversations around reproductive health that include discussions on infertility and reproductive technologies around fertility. There's a lot of discussion around contraception, but not around infertility.
Yes.
And these are things that we need to start considering as the numbers are increasing because rights are being violated by the lack of these conversations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about rights being violated. I'd like you to get into that with examples, and at the same time, tell us what it would take for schools and other institutions to ensure that children and parents and everyone involved is educated enough about their rights, what they need to know in terms of their health, so that they do not end up on the other side infertile, and all these things surrounding sexual education and reproductive education at a younger age. Would it take the law in enforcing this? How can we get to a point where we're well informed and well insured at the same time?
Okay. So in terms of the rights being violated, we can refer to the right to reproductive health, which is guaranteed in the Constitution, the right to information, and the right to found a family. And that would be attached to the parents or the persons who are seeking to have children or the person seeking to have a child. But in terms of comprehensive sexuality education, a number of things are already in place. So we do have the Children's Act, we have the Charter for the Rights of the Child, we have the African Convention on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and we have commitments made by our government. So we have the East and Southern African Ministerial Commitment to ensure that comprehensive sexuality education is implemented or enforced within the country. So that's something that's also quite contentious in terms of what is age-appropriate information for children around their reproductive health and rights. And this is something that needs to be put in place. And a number of studies have already been undertaken to note that, one, CSC, comprehensive sexuality education, is not offered across the board. And part of this is because a lot of schools are owned by churches. And are managed by churches, which then means that this aspect of education is ignored, or if it is provided, it's provided in a very minimal way or provided in a very antagonistic way, which means a lot of it is based on fear. So what it is that you're taught sex is bad. If you have sex, you're given flashes of the multiple diseases you can get. But no one is actually given an over-encompassing view of what reproductive health looks like and what they need to understand and appreciate going into it. And this doesn't have to happen when you're 3 or when you're 5 or when you're 7. This can happen when you're 17 or when you're 16, because realistically, most people leave school at 18. They are old enough then to somewhat appreciate these consequences. And there is a concept known as evolving capacities, in that you can't treat a 2-year-old the same way you treat a 17-year-old. And that's what our law does. Basically, between 0 and until the day you turn 18, you're a child.
Okay.
And we data for how you evolve as a person between those years, despite the fact that you are evolving. And we are obliged to take that into consideration. So that as a concept needs to be put in how we both teach our children and the type of content to provide to them in the school setting.
Now, thank you very much. We're going to get closing remarks from all our guests, and of course, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Morning Express.
This is KTN News. East Africa will host a special forum on 9th and 10th September 2020 with the theme Safeguarding Donkey Population for Livelihoods. On Wednesday 9th September from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m, we will focus on debunking donkey breeding as a solution to dwindling donkey population numbers and why must we preserve donkey numbers. On Thursday 10th September from 7:30 p.m. to 9 p.m, we will focus on can donkey breeding be a solution to the insatiable global skin trade, and highlighting socio-economic contribution of donkeys.
In African culture, music carries a deeper meaning, and the bearing of the music in Africa is on the brink of extinction.
As we keep hope alive, hope for a better tomorrow, hope for an end to the COVID-19 crisis, we can still find it within ourselves to share our hope with those who are unable to see the light in their tunnels, making this a collective fight as we stand with Kenya. This is why we are reaching out to every single individual and organization willing to help make a better today for those less fortunate and hardest hit by the effects of COVID-19. For individuals willing to make their monetary donations, you can do so by sending your donation to paybill 542542, account number 0010001650250, or you can choose to donate care packs bought at any Tuskys branch in Nairobi, which include Skuma Masiku at 750, Skuma Wiki at 1,500, and Skuma Mwezi at 4,000, and drop them off at the designated collection points within the supermarkets. You can also choose to send the money for the care packs you would like to purchase via M-Pesa, till number 373132, account Stand with Kenya. And lastly, you can purchase the care packs using www.tuskys.dpo.store. For any organizations wishing to make donations, get in touch with the Stand with Kenya team through standwithkenya@standardmedia.co.ke. As a nation, we have faced many challenges, but we have always overcome together, united in one accord. This is yet another call for unity. Stand with Kenya and make this fight our collective fight, playing our part to make a better and stronger Kenya a possibility in our midst and the normal for our future. This is for us. This is for Kenya's hope. Stand with Kenya for the love of humanity. This is KTN News.
right, we're on the tail end of that conversation on IVF. And now I'd like to give the opportunity to Dr. Kandwana to give us his closing remark on what this treatment bodes for everyone, and of course anything else he'd like us to know about infertility and its treatment. Over to you, Dr. Kandwana.
Okay, so, we were just talking about insurance cover for IVF and how it's not there, but then there are certain corporates and insurances which cover IVF, and NHIF is doing the cover for IVF for the civil servants and the National Police Service. They are soon to be starting. In fact, they should have started in September.
Right.
They had it before, but it was shelved off for a few months.
Okay.
And now it may be starting again. Also, the Teachers Service Commission are covered. The clients of the Teachers Service Commission, the members are covered for this by the minute insurance. So for IVF. And then there are certain corporates, like KPLC, KRA, etc., which are covering their clients for the members or the employees for IVF.
Okay.
So it's a healthy beginning as far as insurance covers are concerned for IVF, and the patient is covered for almost 500,000, 400,000 to 500,000 shillings for an IVF treatment.
Which is pretty good. Okay, let's move on to Nerima, your closing remarks.
In closing, I would like to note that the lack of regulatory framework is the largest problem that we have at this point, and the lack of information. And Parliament really does need to ease this by passing a law. The Reproductive Health Bill 2019 is before the 12th Parliament, and while it has been taken for first reading, there has been a lot of contention around many issues and misinformation around it. So I would urge Kenyans to read the bill and understand it and see what areas need to be strengthened before attacking it.
Okay. Now, Esther Nyambura is with us on phone. She had her personal experience with IVF, and of course I'd like her to finish off. Tell us what you'd like Kenyans to know about it as we conclude this conversation.
Thank you so much. I would like all Kenyans to know that it is a good procedure. They can see it. It is really making the woman smile and the family as well. Even as late as 4 years, even you can feel positive, because I'm having a newborn and I'm 44 years. I delivered just another day, plus now the twins that I had.
Right.
My family is complete. And I'm also grateful to the employers, like TSC, they paid for me the firstborn. So I'm so grateful. Let people not fear IVF. It's one among the best things that is making the parents men smile, and even the men.
Okay.
So let's take it. It is a good procedure.
It is a viable.
I'm really encouraging, and I'm also having a community-based organization.
Yes.
Let women come to me. Give them my number. I encourage them.
All right.
And I direct them to the right hospital to go.
Okay, thank you very much. That is Esther Nyambura, who was a patient and recipient of IVF success story right there, and she's saying